Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where winter isn't cozy, it's predatory, a world with no radiators, no electric blankets, no glowing thermostat quietly negotiating comfort on your behalf. You are a medieval peasant, and the cold is not an inconvenience, it is a condition of life. And yes, you probably won't survive this. Most people didn't. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a medieval village as the sun drops early, vanishing behind a grey horizon sometime in mid-afternoon. It's winter, deep winter, the kind that locks rivers in ice and turns breath into something you can almost grab with your hands. There's no dramatic announcement that the coldest part of the year has arrived. It just settles in one day and refuses to leave for months. Your boots crunch on frozen earth, and already your toes feel like distant rumours rather than functioning body parts. There is no such thing as turning the heat on. Heat is something you chase and hoard and ration like food. If you want warmth tonight, you have to earn it before the sun goes down. That means hauling wood, dried dung, or whatever will burn slowly enough to matter. A historical fact that often surprises people is that firewood was not abundant for peasants. By the later Middle Ages, deforestation in many parts of Europe meant wood was expensive, regulated, or outright illegal to gather freely. So even before sleep enters your mind, you're already thinking about scarcity. Your house waits for you, if house feels like the right word. It's low, squat, and built more like a survival container than a home. Thick walls of wattle and daub, mud mixed with straw pressed into a frame of rough timber. There are no windows as you'd recognise them, maybe just a shuttered opening stuffed with cloth or straw. Glass is a luxury reserved for churches and the very wealthy. Light and heat escape too easily through glass, and tonight, nothing warm is allowed to escape. You duck inside because the doorway is intentionally small. That's not poor craftsmanship, that's thermal strategy. Every inch of space inside this structure is meant to trap heat, not impress visitors. The air smells like smoke, animals, damp earth, and human bodies layered over one another. It's not pleasant, but it's familiar. Comfort here is measured by whether you survive until morning. The cold doesn't disappear indoors, it just changes shape. Outside it bites, inside it seeps. The packed dirt floor radiates chill upward, and you instinctively stay off it as much as possible. There's a central hearth, sometimes nothing, more than a shallow pit, but the fire is low now. Letting it burn through the night is risky and wasteful. Chimneys, when they exist at all, are crude, and a stray spark could mean the entire village goes up in flames while everyone sleeps. Entire medieval towns burned this way, and people remembered. There's a long-standing scholarly debate about just how cold medieval interiors actually were. Some historians argue that thick walls and body heat made peasant homes surprisingly tolerable. Others point to frost found inside buildings and breath freezing overnight. The truth likely depended on the winter, the region, and how many living creatures were packed into the space. And tonight, there are quite a few. You're not alone in this room. You never are. Family members, maybe a hired hand, possibly a neighbour in need, all share the same space. And then there are the animals. A cow, a pig, a few chickens. They're not here because of affection. They're here because they generate heat. A quirky but very real fact. A single cow can give off as much heat as a small space heater. Medieval peasants understood thermodynamics long before the word existed. As night settles in, you feel the temperature drop further. Cold behaves differently after dark. It feels heavier, more deliberate. Your breath fogs even inside, and the smoke from the dying fire hangs low, stinging your eyes. But you don't complain. Complaining burns energy, and energy is precious. You've been cold before. You'll be cold again. This is just how nights work. You start preparing for sleep early, not because you're tired, but because darkness limits what you can do. Candles cost money. Oil costs money. Sleep becomes the cheapest activity available. You layer your clothing instead of removing it. Tunic, undershirt, wool hose, maybe a cap pulled low over your ears. Modern instincts about sleeping comfortably don't apply here. Warmth beats comfort every time. There's no bed. Waiting for you in the modern sense. That comes later. For now, you lower yourself carefully, conserving movement, feeling the cold creep closer as your body stops working to keep itself warm. your muscles tense, instinctively curling inward. This isn't just habit, it's biology. Curling up reduces surface area, trapping heat where it matters most. Even sleep posture here is a survival tactic. Outside, the wind starts to move. You hear it slip through cracks, push against the walls, whistle softly like it's searching for a way in. Winter nights are long, and you know that once the fire goes out completely, the cold will press closer. But you also know something else. Dawn will come, eventually, and that knowledge, thin as it is enough to let you close your eyes. The cold doesn't stop you from sleeping, it teaches you how. You wake without meaning to because medieval sleep isn't a single smooth descent into unconsciousness. It never is. The cold nudges you awake, the way a hand on your shoulder might, firm, unavoidable, almost polite in its persistence. Your eyes open to darkness so complete it feels solid. This is the rhythm of winter nights, especially during the coldest centuries of the Middle Ages, when Europe slips into what historians later call the Little Ice Age. You don't know that term, of course. You just know the winters feel longer than the stories your grandparents told. Rivers freeze more often now, snow lingers into spring, harvests fail with alarming regularity. A historical fact that anchors this moment is that from roughly the 14th to the 19th century, average temperatures across Europe had dropped by about 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. That doesn't sound like much, until you remember there's no insulation, no central heating and no safety net. 1 or 2 degrees can mean the difference between a wet winter and a lethal one. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb anyone pressed close to you. Movement risks letting, precious warmth escape. Bodies nearby radiate a faint shared heat, and you cling to it the way sailors cling to driftwood. This is not an era of personal space. Survival overrides privacy every time. Entire families sleep together, not out of affection, but necessity. The Little Ice Age doesn't announce itself dramatically. It creeps in through smaller summers, colder rains, and winters that refuse to loosen their grip. You notice it in the way bread grows harder to come by, in the way wool cloaks feel thinner every year, in the way old people stop making it through February. Winter becomes something to endure rather than seasonally tolerate. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether medieval people perceived this climate shift consciously. Some historians argue they noticed patterns but lacked the language to articulate them. Others believe sermons, chronicles and folk songs reveal an acute awareness that the world had grown colder. Either way, you feel it in your bones, literally. Cold settles into joints and refuses to leave. Your house does what it can, thick walls slow the wind, and the low ceiling traps what little warmth exists. Smoke stains the rafters black, forming a kind of accidental insulation. It's been suggested, somewhat controversially, that generations of soot build-up may have helped retain heat. A quirky fact, but one that fits the reality here. Filth, by accident, sometimes helps you survive. Outside, the village is silent in a way modern nights never are. No engines, no distant hum of electricity, just wind across frozen ground, maybe the crack of ice shifting on a nearby pond. Sound travels differently in cold air, sharper, clearer, and more ominous. Every noise feels like it matters. You drift back towards sleep only to wake again later. This is normal. Medieval sleep often comes in 2 segments. First sleep and second sleep separated by an hour or 2 of wakefulness. During warmer months, people might talk, pray, or even visit neighbours during this interval. In winter, you stay still. Talking wastes heat. Movement wastes heat. Thought itself feels expensive. Your mind wanders anyway. Cold nights invite reflection. You think about last winter, and the one before that. You think about the neighbour who didn't wake up one morning, fingers blackened with frost. Frostbite is common, even indoors. Toes, ears, noses, anything exposed long enough. You tuck your feet closer instinctively. Food plays a role here too. You went to sleep with a full belly because winter meals are heavier when possible. Beans, porridge, bread soaked in fat if you're lucky. Fat burns slowly, providing warmth through the night. This is one of those quiet pieces of medieval knowledge passed down without textbooks. Eat well before bed or you'll freeze faster. Alcohol enters the picture too. Ale is safer than water and more common than milk in winter. It gives a fleeting sense of warmth, though it actually lowers core temperature by dilating blood vessels. Medieval people don't know the physiology, but they know the outcome. Too much drink before sleep can be deadly on cold nights. There are stories, half warning, half superstition, about men who fell asleep warm and woke frozen. Superstition thrives in winter. Cold feels supernatural. You've heard it said that winter winds carry spirits, that frost is the breath of restless dead. Some believe certain nights are colder because something unseen is passing through the village. These beliefs don't make the cold worse, but they give it meaning, and meaning makes fear manageable. You pull your wool closer. Wool is everything here. It insulates even when damp, and it's one of the few fabrics that still works in brutal conditions. Linen is useless in winter. Fur is rare for peasants. Wool is survival. Even your blanket, if you have one, is likely just more wool, thick, heavy, itchy, and worth its weight in grain. Time stretches strangely in the dark. Without a clock, night becomes a vague expanse punctuated by discomfort. You measure progress by how cold you feel, by how often you wake, by whether the wind has shifted. Eventually, almost imperceptibly, the darkness lightens. Dawn doesn't arrive, it leaks in. You've made it through another night. Not comfortably, not heroically, just barely, and that's enough. In a world shaped by cold, endurance is the quiet victory no one celebrates. You don't stretch, you don't linger. Cold teaches efficiency. Another day waits, and winter is far from finished. Morning doesn't feel like relief. It feels like obligation. You open your eyes because the faint grey light tells you it's time, not because your body feels rested or warm. Cold stiffens you in place, turning joints into rusted hinges. For a moment you consider staying exactly where you are, cocooned in shared heat and wool. But the day won't wait, and neither will hunger. You rise, slowly, because moving too fast in the cold can make you dizzy. Blood shifts, the room spins just slightly, and you pause until it settles. This is normal. Everything here has a rhythm designed around not wasting energy. Winter punishes excess. Now, in the thin light, you really see the interior of the peasant home. It's smaller than you remember at night. That's a trick darkness plays. It softens edges, hides flaws. By day, the reality is clear. Low ceiling, one room, mud walls cracked and patched countless times. The floor is hard-packed earth, swept but never clean. A historical fact worth sitting with. Most medieval peasants lived their entire lives in a single-room dwelling, shared with humans and animals alike. The hearth is cold now, just a circle of grey ash and blackened stones. Rekindling a fire is a careful decision. Firewood is counted, not casually burned. You might wait until the worst chill of the morning passes, or until cooking becomes unavoidable. Smoke already coats your throat from years of exposure. Chronic coughs are common. Lung damage is invisible but everywhere. There's a debate among historians about how smoky these homes really were. Some argue smoke escaped efficiently through roof gaps and doors. Others point to skeletal evidence of respiratory illness, suggesting constant exposure. Standing here, breathing in the lingering scent of soot, it's hard to believe the air was ever truly clear. You look to the walls. They're thick. Not because of engineering precision, but because piling on mud and straw was the easiest way to build. Thickness equals insulation, even if imperfect. The materials are local, cheap, and endlessly repairable. When a wall cracks, you don't panic. You smear more mud. Medieval architecture isn't about permanence. It's about surviving the next season. Your bed, if it can be called that, sits low, close to the ground. That's intentional too. Heat rises, yes, but so does smoke. Sleeping. Low keeps you warmer and lets you breathe slightly cleaner air. The bed itself is a wooden frame, or sometimes just a raised edge, filled with straw, hay, or dried leaves stuffed into a cloth sack. Mattresses stuffed with feathers exist, but not for you. Those belong to monasteries or the wealthy. Straw mattresses are replaced often, not for comfort, but because they rot, harbour insects, and absorb moisture. A quirky but uncomfortable fact. Fleas thrive in these beds even in winter. Cold slows them, but it doesn't kill them. You scratch absent-mindedly as you pull the bedding aside. Clothing becomes bedding, bedding becomes clothing. There's no clear boundary. Wool cloaks double as blankets. Spare tunics become padding. Nothing has a single purpose, everything must earn its place. But when you dress, or rather adjust at what you already wore to sleep, you do so with the economy of someone who knows replacements are not guaranteed. Your head covering matters more than anything else, A simple wool cap or linen coif can mean the difference between tolerable cold and misery. You lose an enormous amount of heat through your head, though medieval people don't frame it scientifically. They just know from experience, uncovered heads suffer. Outside, the village begins to stir. Smoke curls from a few chimneys as others make the same calculation you are. Fire now or fire later. Livestock shift, stamping hooves against frozen ground. Animals survive winter too, though not always. A cow lost to cold or hunger is a disaster, not just emotionally, but economically. That animal is milk, labour, manure, heat. Losing one can push a family into ruin. Children wake slowly. They sleep bundled together, swaddled even beyond infancy. Shared sleep is protective. It keeps them warm and allows adults to monitor breathing during the coldest nights. Infant mortality spikes in winter, and everyone knows it. There are no statistics, just empty cradles. You step outside briefly, breath exploding into white clouds. The cold is sharper now than it was at night. That's another winter trick. The coldest moments often come just before sunrise. The ground is iron hard, fields locked in stasis. There will be little work today beyond maintenance and survival. Winter isn't productive, it's defensive. Food stores weigh on your mind constantly. Grain bins, salted meat, dried peas, everything must last. Cold helps preserve food, but scarcity looms anyway. There's comfort in routine meals, even boring ones. Eating warms you, gives you something to anticipate when a night's stretched long. As the day moves on, the house slowly warms, not from fire, but from life. Bodies moving, animals breathing, doors opening and closing. Heat accumulates in tiny increments. By midday you might remove a layer, not because it's warm, but because it's less unbearable. You already know tonight will mirror last night. Same preparations, same calculations, same cold waiting. Patiently. There's no drama in this realization, just acceptance. Winter is not an event, it's an environment. And when evening comes again, you'll return to the same low bed, the same shared space, the same wool pulled tight. Because this house, flawed and soaky and crowded, is the thin barrier between you and a season that kills without apology. You don't romanticize it, you live it. By the time night returns, you're already tired in a way that sleep doesn't fully fix. Winter fatigue isn't about effort, it's about resistance. Every movement today pushed against cold, hunger, and the slow drag of darkness. As you prepare once again for sleep, your body understands the routine even if your mind resents it. You tend the hearth briefly, coaxing a small fire from yesterday's embers. Flames flicker, low, never allowed to roar. Fire is both friend and threat. A single spark can climb a thatched roof in seconds. Entire villages have vanished overnight because someone wanted warmth just a little longer. This fear is so ingrained that even children know it. Never leave a fire unattended at night. There's a historical record of winter fire ordinances in medieval towns, banning overnight hearth fires or requiring them to be banked and watched. Rural peasants don't have written rules pinned to walls, but custom is just as powerful. You let the fire die down deliberately, accepting the cold rather than gambling with flames. Smoke thickens as the fire fades. Without a strong draft, it lingers, rolling along the ceiling, seeping into clothing and hair. Your eyes sting. Your lungs protest quietly. Over years, this kind of exposure scars them. Archaeologists have found blackened lung tissue in remains from this period, a silent testimony to nights like this. When the fire is gone, darkness takes over completely. There's no artificial glow, just the faint outline of bodies and walls. You move by memory now, hands finding familiar edges. Sound becomes more important than sight. A shift in straw, a cough, the low, steady breathing of animals nearby. The floor radiates cold like a stored memory. Earth remembers winter. You avoid touching it longer than necessary, lowering yourself onto bedding that's thin by modern standards but carefully arranged. Straw sacks are fluffed, not for softness, but to trap air. Air is insulation. Even if you don't know the science, you know the effect. A quirky fact from medieval household accounts, people sometimes slept on dried fern fronds instead of straw, believing they repelled insects and held warmth better. Whether that worked is debated, but the belief itself mattered. When survival is fragile, hope hides in small choices. You arrange yourself close to others, Knees drawn up, shoulders hunched. Sleeping spread out is a luxury. Curling inward conserves heat. This posture becomes so habitual that skeletal remains from the period often show signs of joint wear consistent with this prolonged curled sleeping. Your body adapts even if it aches. Clothing stays on, all of it. Belts might loosen slightly, boots sometimes remain. Removing layers risks not getting warm again. Nightcaps are pulled low. Hair, if uncovered, becomes brittle with cold. Head coverings are sacred objects in winter. Passed down, patched, never wasted. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether medieval people experienced sleep differently because of the cold. Some argue that chronic discomfort kept sleep shallow and fragmented. Others suggest people simply adapted, their bodies learning to rest efficiently despite conditions. Lying here, drifting in and out, it feels like both could be true. You listen to the night. Wind presses against the walls, probing for weaknesses. Somewhere wood creaks as temperature shifts make beams contract. Animals shift in their sleep, hooves scraping softly. These sounds are oddly comforting. Silence would be worse. Silence might mean something has gone wrong. Outside, the moonlight reflects off frost, casting a pale glow through cracks in the walls. It's beautiful in a distant, uncaring way. Cold landscapes often are. You don't admire it long. Beauty doesn't warm you. Your mind wanders, as it often does during the long middle hours. You think about stories told around winter fires, tales of travellers frozen on roads, of spirits that follow those who wander after dark. These stories serve a purpose. They keep people indoors. They keep them alive. At some point you wake again. This is first sleep ending, second sleep waiting. In warmer seasons you might rise, say a prayer, check on animals. Tonight, you stay still. Even prayer feels like it might leak heat from your mouth. You adjust your blanket, wool scraping softly, and pull it tighter. Wool smells like lanolin and smoke. It's not pleasant, but it's reassuring. This smell means protection. Gradually, exhaustion wins. Your body prioritizes survival over comfort, shutting down complaints. You sink into a deeper sleep not because it's warm, but because rest is necessary. Cold teaches compromise. When morning eventually returns, it will find you exactly where it left you. Curled inward, layered in wool, breathing shallowly but steadily. Another night endured. Another small victory no one records. Winter doesn't need to defeat you all at once. It just waits. By now, your body understands something your thoughts never quite accept. Warmth doesn't belong to individuals here. It belongs to groups, to clusters of breathing, shifting life pressed close together against the cold. As night settles in again, you instinctively move closer to others, not out of affection, but because isolation is dangerous. Shared body heat is one of the oldest survival tools humans have, and in medieval winters it's indispensable. You sleep shoulder to shoulder, sometimes chest to back, bodies arranged like stacked kindling. Children are placed in palmas. The middle, elders, where they can be monitored. No one frames this as kindness. It's logistics. A historical fact that rarely makes it into textbooks is that even adult men who might otherwise value independence slept communally during winter. Privacy is a warm weather concept. In the cold months, survival outranks dignity every time. You feel the difference immediately. Where bodies touch, the cold retreats slightly. Not gone, never gone, but softened. Breath mingles in the dark, creating a shared pocket of warmth and dampness. The air smells heavier now, thick with human presence. It's not pleasant, but it's effective. Animals contribute too. A pig snores softly nearby, its bulk radiating steady heat. Chickens shift on their roost, feathers puffed. The cow exhales slowly, rhythmically, like a living furnace. There's a reason medieval byres were often attached to houses. Heat was heat no matter the source. Some scholars argue that this close proximity increased disease transmission, especially in winter. Others counter that without it, many simply wouldn't have survived the cold at all. Lying here, pressed against warmth, the debate feels abstract. You know which option keeps your fingers from going numb. You settle in, adjusting limbs so they don't fall asleep. Someone's elbow digs into your side. A child's foot finds your shin. You don't push them away. Movement risks breaking the fragile thermal balance you've built. Discomfort is tolerated. Cold is not. The room grows quieter as breathing sinks. There's something almost hypnotic about it. A low, collective rhythm that lulls you towards sleep. You've heard modern people talk about sleeping alone to rest better. That idea feels alien here. Alone means cold, cold means danger. A quirky but telling fact. Medieval medical texts sometimes recommended sleeping with others specifically to preserve vital heat. Doctors of the time believed warmth was a life force that could be shared and replenished communally. The theory may be flawed, but the practice works. You drift off, then wake again as always. The night is segmented, but now the waking feels different. Safer. You're wrapped in a living blanket. The cold still presses at the edges, nose, fingertips, toes, but your core holds steady. Your mind wanders to those who sleep alone. Widows without family, travellers caught outside, the poor without shelter. Winter is cruelest to the solitary. There are stories of people found frozen just steps from warmth, victims not of distance but of exhaustion. The cold doesn't chase, it waits. You tuck your chin down, minimising exposed skin. Breath warms the wool near your face, forming a faint pocket of heat. You've learned these tricks without instruction. Everyone has. Survival knowledge doesn't need teaching when mistakes are fatal. At some point, someone coughs, a deep rattling sound. Winter coughs linger, smoke, cold air, and less damp conditions, combine to scar lungs slowly. Illness spreads easily in close quarters, but again it's a trade-off. Warmth now is worth sickness later. Later isn't guaranteed. The wind rises outside, rattling something loose. You feel it through the walls, a pressure change more than a sound. Bodies press closer instinctively. No words are exchanged. No one needs to say, stay close. The cold says it for you. Eventually sleep deepens, muscles relax just enough. Dreams come, often vivid in winter. Fires, sunlight, green fields. Your mind remembers warmth even when your body can't find it. When morning comes, it will pull you apart again, scattering the shared heat back into individual bodies. But for now, in the darkest hours, you're not alone. You're part of a small breathing system designed to endure. In the Middle Ages, warmth isn't something you own, it's something you share. When you finally wake for the day, there's a brief moment of confusion. Your body feels heavier, pinned in place by limbs that aren't entirely yours. Then memory returns. Winter, shared sleep, the quiet math of survival. You ease yourself free carefully, because sudden movement can collapse the warmth everyone has been guarding all night. Beds, if you can call them that, reveal themselves in the grey morning light. What you slept on looks less like furniture and more like a nest hastily abandoned. Straw pokes through seams in the fabric sack, bits of chaff cling to clothing and hair. You brush them off absent-mindedly, knowing they'll be back by nightfall. There's a historical misconception that medieval peasants slept on bare floors. In truth, most had some form of raised bedding by the later Middle Ages, even if crude. Wood pallets, rope-laced frames, or simply a low platform helped keep sleepers off the coldest air pooling near the ground. It wasn't luxury, it was adaptation. Still, these beds are a far cry from comfort. Straw compresses quickly, losing insulation. Moisture from breath and bodies seeps in, making it heavier and colder over time. That's why bedding is fluffed daily, shaken out when weather allows, and replaced often if materials are available. Bedding maintenance is survival maintenance. A quirky fact preserved in household records: some peasants added dried rushes or reeds to their beds in winter, believing they held warmth longer than straw. Whether they truly did is debated, but variety itself mattered. Mixing materials trapped more air, even if no one explained it that way. You check the corners of the bed out of habit. Fleas are less active in deep winter, but they don't disappear. Bites itch more when skin is already irritated by cold. Scratching breaks skin, which invites infection. Everything is connected. Everything has consequences. Clothing, again, becomes part of the bed. Cloaks are shaken out, folded, and kept close. Nothing is ever far from reach. Night comes early in winter, and preparation is constant. You think about tonight already, even as the day begins. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how much sleep medieval people actually got during winter. Some argue that long nights allowed for extended rest, even if broken. Others suggest chronic cold and hunger reduce true restorative sleep. Your own body feels perpetually tired but functional. That may have been enough. You step outside briefly, carrying bedding to air it if the wind isn't too biting. Cold air helps reduce dampness and pests. The sky is pale, washed out, the sun a weak presence. You don't linger. Fingers stiffen quickly. Inside, the house slowly wakes. Children are wrapped tighter. Animals are fed, their warmth once again becoming part of the household economy. Every task is slower in winter. Hands fumble, tools feel heavier, time stretches, food is simple, porridge, thickened with whatever fat is left. Eating warms you immediately, a small fire from the inside. This is why breakfast matters in winter. An empty stomach is a liability. You notice how everyone moves carefully, conserving energy. Laughter is quieter, voices are lower. Winter compresses not just space, but spirit. And yet there's a strange steadiness to it. You've done this before, so has everyone else. As the day wears on, you mend what you can. Clothing patched now will matter tonight. A tear in wool is an invitation to cold. Thread is precious. So is time. You work near the hearth when it's lit, hands numb even then. The bed waits, reshaped and ready, like a familiar challenge. You'll return to it later, layered in everything you own, pressed against others, trusting straw and wool to do their quiet work. Sleep here isn't about comfort or dreams. It's about not freezing, and somehow night after night that's enough. You don't expect warmth anymore. You plan around its absence. By the time evening arrives again, your hands smell faintly of lanolin and smoke. Wool has been with you all day, patched, folded, shaken out, pulled close. In winter, wool isn't just fabric, it's infrastructure. It's the thin, stubborn barrier between your body and a season that wants you rigid and still. As you prepare for sleep, you gather every woolen thing you own. Cloaks, blankets, spare tunics, nothing is decorative, nothing optional. Wool works because it traps air, and trapped air slows the theft of heat. Medieval people don't phrase it that way, but they know the result. Wool stays warm even when damp. Linen does not. Cotton is rare. Silk is a rumour. A historical fact worth lingering on. By the High Middle Ages, sheep farming had become one of Europe's most important rural industries. Not because wool was fashionable, but because it was essential. Entire economies revolved around keeping people warm enough to survive winter. You spread the wool carefully, layering it rather than piling it. One blanket traps less heat than two separated by air. You've learned this by feel, not theory. Over years, trial and error become instinct. Cold is an unforgiving teacher. The texture is coarse, wool scratches at exposed skin, especially around the neck and wrists. You tolerate it. Comfort is secondary. Some people wear a thin linen layer beneath wool to reduce irritation, but linen steals warmth. You decide against it tonight. Better itchy than numb. A quirky belief persists in your village that wool made from sheep shorn under a full moon is warmer. No one can prove it, but the idea endures. In winter, belief itself can feel like insulation. Thin, but comforting. You wrap yourself in layers until movement becomes restricted. This isn't accidental. Less movement means less heat loss. Even turning over in sleep is done slowly, deliberately. You settle into your usual curled posture, knees drawn up, shoulders hunched inward. There's a debate among historians about whether medieval people felt cold the way modern people do, or whether they were simply accustomed to it. Some suggest constant exposure recalibrated comfort thresholds. Others argue the body never truly adapts, it just endures. Lying here, you still feel the cold, you've just learnt not to expect it to go away. The wool carries smells with it. Sheep, smoke, old sweat, earth. These are the smells of winter survival. Cleanliness changes meaning when warmth is at stake. Washing wool too often strips its natural oils, making it less effective. So you don't wash it unless you must. Cold water, after all, is its own punishment. You pull a cap down over your ears. Head coverings matter more than extra blankets. Heat escapes fastest from the head, and once your ears ache, sleep becomes impossible. Even monks, sworn to austerity, often wore nightcaps in winter despite rules against comfort. Animals shift nearby, and you angle yourself so the thickest wool is between you and the coldest wall. Walls, even thick ones, bleed heat all night. You avoid direct contact with them. People sometimes hang extra cloth or straw against walls in winter for this reason. Primitive insulation, improvised but effective. As the fire fades completely, the room's temperature drops another degree. You feel it immediately. Wool tightens around you like a reluctant ally, holding the line but not pushing back. You breathe slowly, minimizing moisture loss. Damp air steals warmth faster. Sleep comes unevenly. You drift, wake, adjust. Pull wool higher. Tuck it under your chin. Each movement is small, economical. Eventually, exhaustion smooths the edges of discomfort. You dream of summer, not in detail, just in sensation. Warmth without effort. Sleep without planning. These dreams aren't longing so much as memory. Your body remembers what the world feels like when it isn't hostile. Outside, snow may fall, you won't hear it. Snow muffles sound, making nights eerily quiet. That silence can feel dangerous, as if the world itself is holding its breath. But, wrapped in wool, pressed near others, you hold on. Wool doesn't defeat winter, it delays it. And delay, night after night, is how you survive. Warmth here is never complete, it's just enough. When sleep finally loosens its grip on you, it does so reluctantly. You surface slowly, aware first of weight, the familiar pressure of clothing, wool and shared bodies, before you become aware of cold again. Cold never fully leaves. It waits at the edges, patient, confident that you'll notice eventually. You take stock of yourself the way medieval mornings require. Fingers move, toes respond, good, no numbness that lingers too long. Frostbite announces itself quietly at first, and you've learned to check before standing. A historical reality often overlooked is that mild frostbite was common even indoors during harsh winters. People lived with it, scars and all. You adjust your clothing, which you never really removed. Boots are stiff. Laces feel like wire. Leather hardens in the thaw, cold shrinking slightly overnight. You work them back into shape with your hands, breath fogging the air. Nightcaps come off last. Hair underneath is flattened, brittle with cold. You smooth it down, not for appearance, but to fit the cap back on later. Heat lost from the head is heat you won't get back easily. There's a small ritual to waking in winter. You don't jump up, you sit, letting blood move gradually. Sudden movement makes you lightheaded, sometimes nauseous. This isn't weakness. It's winter physiology. Bodies conserve, then resist sudden demand. The bedding is rearranged again, straw fluffed, wool folded, cloaks shaken free of stiffness. You hang what you can near the hearth when it's lit, not to dry, it's already dry, but to make it pliable again. Frozen fabric doesn't insulate well. There's a scholarly debate about whether medieval peasants recognised frostbite as a distinct injury. Some texts suggest it was lumped in with other cold-related ailments, while others describe blackened tissue and numbness in detail. Regardless of terminology, people knew its danger. They warmed affected areas slowly, never near open flame, understanding instinctively what modern medicine confirms. You step outside briefly, cap pulled low. The world is colourless, as if winter has leached pigment from everything. Breath crystallises instantly, sound is sharp. Every footstep crunches with finality. Inside, animals are restless. Cold makes them irritable too. You tend to them carefully. An injured animal in winter is a crisis. Their warmth at night depends on their health during the day. Food is shared, eaten close to the hearth. You hold your bowl with both hands, not just to steady it, but to steal its heat. Porridge warms fingers before it warms your stomach. This small comfort matters more than taste. As the day unfolds, you notice how people avoid unnecessary exposure. Doors open and close quickly. Tasks are clustered. No one lingers. Outside, unless forced. Winter compresses life inward. You think again about sleep tonight, because winter encourages planning ahead. Will the wind shift? Will the fire be enough to take the edge off? Will everyone make it through another night without illness? There's a quiet fear attached to winter sleep. Not panic, something steadier. The knowledge that sleep is vulnerable time, that cold works while you're unconscious, that some nights people simply don't wake up, yet you don't dwell on it. Dwelling wastes energy. Instead, you prepare. More straw. Another patch on wool. A reminder to keep the cap on. When night returns, you'll do all of this again. Because in the Middle Ages, sleep isn't rest, it's maintenance. It's something you manage carefully, night after night, to keep the cold from claiming more than it already has. And when you finally lie down again, wrapped and curled and shared, you'll close your eyes not expecting comfort, only mourning. That, expectation humble as it is, carries you through. As night draws close again, your attention goes instinctively to your head. Not your feet, not your hands, your head. Winter has taught you this lesson thoroughly. You can endure numb toes and stiff fingers, but once cold settles around your ears and scalp, sleep becomes shallow, fractured, almost impossible. You reach for your nightcap, a simple thing, stitched from wool or thick linen, shaped to hug the skull closely. It's unremarkable, and yet essential. A historical fact often buried in inventories and wills is that nightcaps appear frequently among the possessions of even poor households. They weren't fashion, they were equipment. You pull it on slowly, tucking stray hair inside. Hair left loose becomes brittle with cold, snapping easily, exposing skin beneath. Covered hair traps warmth, holds breath close, creates a faint pocket of heat around your temples. It's subtle, but it matters. Some people wear coifs instead, linen hoods tied beneath the chin. Linen isn't warm on its own, but layered beneath wool it reduces itch and holds shape. There's debate among historians about which was more common among peasants, but the conclusion is the same. Head coverings at night were nearly universal in winter. A quirky belief circulates in your village that evil spirits enter through uncovered ears while you sleep. Whether anyone truly believes this is hard to say, but the result is practical. Children are scolded for pulling caps off at night. Elders insist on tying coifs snugly. Folklore becomes thermal policy. You settle into bed again, cap pulled low, ears protected. The difference is immediate. The cold still presses in, but now it feels blunted, as if it's lost a little of its edge. Your breath warms the fabric near your face, and that warmth lingers instead of vanishing into the dark. There's an ongoing scholarly discussion about how much heat the human head actually loses compared to the rest of the body. Modern experiments suggest it's not uniquely excessive, but only if the rest of the body is insulated. In your case, everything matters. Any exposed skin is a liability. You notice how children instinctively pull blankets over their heads, creating tiny tents of fabric. Adults do the same when no one's watching. There's no shame in it, only warmth. Animals nearby mirror this behaviour. Chickens tuck heads under wings. The cow lowers its head close to its body. Nature agrees with your instincts. The fire is gone now, leaving behind a cold that feels heavier, without its faint glow. Darkness presses close. You hear someone shifting, pulling their cap lower, muttering softly. No conversation follows. Words feel unnecessary. Sleep comes in fragments. Each time you wake, it's because something has cooled, an ear uncovered, a cap shifted, a draft found its way through a crack. You adjust, recover, retuck. These movements happen almost without waking fully. Your body has learned to guard heat even while half asleep. There's a quiet fear tied to head cold in winter. Illness often starts there. Ear infections, sinus pain, fevers that linger for weeks. People know this, even if they don't explain it medically. Keep the head warm, and you might avoid sickness. Might. You dream again, briefly. This time, it's of lying in sunlight, head bare, wind warm instead of sharp. Dreams don't tease you, they remind you of balance, of seasons that do change just eventually. When you wake toward morning, your cap is damp with breath. You don't remove it yet. Damp wool still insulates. Removing it would invite cold too quickly. You wait, sitting still, letting the room wake with you. Another night passed, another lesson reinforced. In winter, survival isn't dramatic. It's quiet, repetitive, and deeply practical. You don't sleep warm, you sleep protected. The warmth you feel tonight doesn't come from fire or fabric alone. It comes from something larger, heavier, and very much alive. As darkness settles in, you're aware of it before you see it. The slow shifting weight, the steady breath, the low sounds that fill the room when everything else goes quiet. The animals are settling in for the night too. In winter, animals aren't just property, they're infrastructure. A cow exhales warm air in long, patient bursts, each breath adding a little heat to the space. Pigs radiate warmth constantly, thick-bodied and efficient. Even chickens contribute, their small bodies clustering together like living embers. A historical fact often overlooked is that many medieval peasant homes were physically attached to animal shelters, sharing walls or even interior space to capture this heat. You position yourself accordingly, not too close. Animals are unpredictable, but close enough to benefit. Heat travels. Walls shared with livestock rooms are always warmer. You choose your sleeping spot with this in mind instinctively gravitating toward the side of the house that breathes warmth instead of wind. There's a long-standing scholarly debate about how common full cohabitation with animals really was. Some historians argue animals were mostly kept in adjacent byres, not living rooms. Others point to archaeological evidence, drainage grooves, feeding troughs, dung layers, inside domestic structures. The truth likely varied by region and winter severity. In the coldest months, rules softened. Survival bent tradition. A quirky detail preserved in folklore claims cows could sense extreme cold before humans and would refuse to lie down on certain nights. Whether that's true or not, people watched animals closely in winter. An uneasy animal meant trouble, illness, cold stress, or worse. The smell is strong, there's no pretending otherwise. Warmth smells like manure, hay, and animal breath. Cleanliness gives way to necessity. No one complains. Complaints don't insulate. You listen to the rhythm of the animals as you settle in. Their breathing becomes part of the night's soundtrack, steady and reassuring. In some ways, it's safer than silence. Silence suggests absence. Absence suggests loss. There's danger here too. Animals can kick, bite, or panic in the dark. Children are kept at a distance. You stay alert even as you sleep lightly. Winter sleep is never fully surrendered. It's guarded. You curl inward again, wool tight, cap low, body angled to catch rising warmth. The difference is subtle but real. Nights without animals are remembered as colder, harsher, longer. Nights with them pass slightly faster. As you drift towards sleep, you think, briefly, about how strange this would seem to someone centuries away, sleeping beside livestock for warmth, measuring comfort by breath and body mass. But here it's normal, necessary. The animals shift once more, then settle. Heat accumulates slowly, almost imperceptibly. You don't feel warm, you feel less cold. And in winter, that's success. You close your eyes, trusting hooves and hides to do their quiet work through the night. The fire is gone now, reduced to memory and a faint ring of ash. You feel its absence immediately. Fire doesn't just warm a room, it reassures. Without its glow, winter nights feel longer, heavier, more deliberate. And yet you let it die every night, because keeping it alive while you sleep is a risk a few peasants can afford. Fireplaces in your world are crude things. There's no sealed hearth, no controlled airflow. Smoke escapes where it can, through roof gaps, doors, sometimes just through faith that it will rise and leave. A historical fact that rarely gets attention is that true chimneys only became common in peasant homes very late in the Middle Ages. And even then, they were inefficient and dangerous. The fires burn low, carefully tended, never trusted. You remember the stories, everyone does. A house that caught while the family slept. A spark jumping to thatch. A village waking to screaming instead of dawn. Winter fires are especially treacherous. Dry roofs, cramped spaces, exhausted people. You don't gamble with that. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how much heat medieval hearths actually provided. Some argue that even small fires significantly raised indoor temperatures. Others point out that heat escaped faster than it accumulated. Lying here now, with the fire long dead, it feels like the latter. Whatever warmth it gave you earlier is already gone, and yet the hearth still matters. Even cold, it anchors the room. It's where food was cooked, tools warmed, stories told. Its stones hold a ghost of heat, releasing it slowly. You position yourself so that any lingering warmth reaches you before it seeps away into the floor. The floor itself is a problem. Packed earth stores cold efficiently. It absorbs heat during the day and gives it back at night. Back to the air, back to your bones. That's why everything about sleep here is raised, layered, buffered. Straw, wood, wool. Distance from dirt is distance from winter. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb others. The fire's absence sharpens every sensation. Drafts feel stronger, sounds feel louder. The crack of wood contracting in the cold echoes like a footstep. You listen, alert despite fatigue. There's a superstition that fires attract spirits in winter, that the warmth draws things that shouldn't be seen. Whether anyone truly believes this is unclear, but the habit remains. Bank the fire, say nothing, let darkness settle undisturbed. Silence feels protective. Your breath fogs faintly. You notice it only because the darkness makes it visible. Each exhale carries heat away, and you learn to breathe shallowly, slowly, conserving warmth. Even breathing becomes deliberate. You think about nobles briefly, those with larger hearths, thicker walls, servants to tend fires through the night. But even they feared fire, castles burn too, stone doesn't save you if the roof goes. The cold presses closer as the hours pass. You feel it creep along the floor, climb the walls, test the wool around your shoulders, but it doesn't rush, it never does. Winter is patient. Eventually exhaustion dulls your awareness. The hearth fades from your thoughts. You curl tighter, trust wool and bodies and animals to compensate for what fire cannot provide. Morning will bring flame again. For now, you accept the dark. You don't fear the cold the way you fear fire. Cold is constant, predictable, almost honest. Fire is the opposite. It promises comfort and delivers catastrophe without warning. As you lie there in the dark, the memory of flames, controlled, useful, and now absent, hovers in your thoughts like something unfinished. Everyone here knows someone who burned. Not badly enough to die, not always, but enough to carry it. Scarred hands, twisted fingers, a limp from skin that healed too tight. Winter nights amplify these memories because fire feels so tempting when the cold presses in hardest. There's a historical record of medieval communities enforcing nighttime fire rules long before formal laws existed. In some villages, families took turns keeping watch during extreme cold spells, staying awake to ensure no embers flared dangerously. Others forbade fires altogether after sunset. The practice varied, but the fear was universal. You listened for sounds that signal danger. A sudden crackle where there shouldn't be one. The hiss of embers catching something dry. Even in sleep, part of your mind stays alert. This isn't anxiety, it's training. Thatched roofs are the greatest risk. Straw, reed and rush ignite easily, especially after weeks of dry winter air. Once fire reaches the roof, there's almost nothing you can do. Water freezes, buckets are slow. Panic spreads faster than flame. There's an ongoing debate among historians about whether peasants slept lighter because of this danger. Some suggest chronic vigilance reduced deep sleep. Others argue people adapted, learning to trust routine and probability. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. You sleep, but lightly. Enough to function, enough to survive. The cold sharpens this vigilance. You're more aware of your surroundings when your body is uncomfortable. Every creak sounds closer. Every shift feels significant. Darkness turns imagination into a second sense. You remember hearing that some households kept a small ember glowing all night, buried deep in ash, just enough to revive the fire at dawn. It's safer than open flame, but still a risk. Tonight you didn't do it. Wood was scarce. Caution won. Your breath fogs again. You pull wool higher, instinctively covering your mouth. Breathing into fabric warms the air before it enters your lungs. It also dampens it, but damp warmth is better than sharp cold. You've learned this through trial, not instruction. Someone nearby stirs, mutters something half-formed. Dreams come uneasy in winter. Fire appears in them often, too bright, too close. You wake with your heart beating faster, then calm yourself. No glow, no heat, just dark. Outside, the wind shifts. You hear it scrape against the walls, searching. Cold and fire feel like opposites, but they share one trait. Both exploit weakness. A crack, a mistake, a moment of inattention. Eventually, your body gives into sleep again. Vigilance fades just enough. Muscles loosen, thoughts slow, the balance holds. You will wake before dawn as always. You will check the hearth, the roof, the air. You will light the fire again with care, gratitude, and restraint. Fire is not comfort here. It's a responsibility. You don't stretch when you wake in the night. Stretching exposes too much too fast. Instead, you draw yourself inward, knees closer to the chest, shoulders rounding forward until your spine curves into a shape that feels instinctively right. This is how winter teaches you to sleep. Not flat, not open, but folded. Curling up isn't just habit, it's physics. A historical observation noted that in medieval medical writing is that people who slept knit together retained more vital heat through the night. They didn't know the language of surface area, but they knew the outcome. Less exposed skin meant less cold stealing warmth away. You've tried sleeping stretched out before. It never lasts. Feet go numb first, then hands, then a deep aching cold settles into your lower back. So now your body curls automatically, even before sleep fully takes you. The position is familiar, almost comforting, like returning to something older than memory. There's a quiet debate among scholars about whether medieval sleeping positions were primarily cultural or environmental. Some argue curled sleep was simply a matter of space, too many bodies, too little room. Others insist cold was the deciding factor. Lying here, with plenty of floor but not enough warmth, you know the answer. Space doesn't freeze you. Exposure does. You tuck your chin down, protecting your throat. You draw your arms in, hands tucked between thighs or pressed against your stomach. Extremities are liabilities. You protect them instinctively, the way animals do. Even the cow nearby sleeps curled, legs folded beneath its body to reduce heat loss. Nature agrees with you. The straw beneath you compresses unevenly, but you don't shift much. Every movement pumps cold air into your bedding. Stillness becomes strategy. You learn to find a position you can tolerate for hours, even if it's not comfortable. Comfort is flexible. Cold is not. A quirky detail preserved in monastic rules mentions that novices were taught to sleep on their sides during winter, never on their backs, because it kept warmth from escaping the belly. Whether this was observation or guesswork, the practice spread beyond monasteries. People noticed what worked. You drift in and out of sleep, body still curled tight. Dreams come fragmented. You feel smaller in them, compact, sheltered. Sometimes you dream you're inside something, an animal's den, a hollow tree, a thick-walled room with no drafts. Dreams mirror need. At some point your legs cramp slightly. Cold tightens muscles. You adjust just enough to ease it, careful not to unravel your warmth. The movement is slow, controlled, almost meditative. Winter teaches patience in the smallest motions. You hear breathing around you, steady and shallow. Everyone sleeps the same way now, curled inward, drawn tight by necessity. If someone uncurls, even briefly, you feel the change in temperature. A pocket of warmth opens, then collapses. You all learn quickly. Morning will ache. Joints always do after nights like this. But aching joints mean circulation returned. They mean life continues. That's a fair trade. You don't think about posture or habit as you drift deeper into sleep. Your body has already decided. Cold has already trained it. In winter, you don't sleep how you want, you sleep how you must. Before sleep ever claims you tonight, warmth begins much earlier in your stomach. Winter teaches you that food is fuel in the most literal sense. You don't eat for pleasure now. You eat to burn slowly through the night, to give your body something to work with when the cold presses in hardest. Dinner is heavier than meals in warmer seasons, thicker, greasier if you're lucky. Porridge enriched with animal fat, bread dipped into broth, beans cooked until they nearly dissolve. A historical fact often mentioned in manorial records is that winter rations, when available, sized calories over variety. Fat was prized not for taste, but for endurance. You eat close to the hearth, bowl cradled in both hands. Heat seeps into your fingers before it reaches your stomach. Steam fogs your face briefly, a small luxury. You eat slowly, deliberately, letting warmth spread outward from your core. A full belly makes the cold easier to tolerate. This is known without theory, passed down through practice. There's a scholarly debate about whether medieval peasants actually increased caloric intake in winter, or simply redistributed food throughout the day. Some argue scarcity made heavier meals impossible. Others point to seasonal slaughter and preserved fats as evidence of winter surplus. Brief, carefully managed. Your experience sits somewhere in between. You eat more when you can, because tomorrow isn't promised. A quirky belief persists that eating onions or garlic before bed keeps the cold out. Some swear by it. Others avoid it, claiming it invites bad dreams. Whether or not it helps, such foods are common in winter, believed to strengthen the body against chill and sickness. Ale accompanies the meal, weak by the modern standards but nourishing. It gives a flush of warmth that spreads quickly, deceptively. You're careful not to drink too much. People know, quietly, grimly, that drunken sleep in winter can be fatal. Ale makes you feel warm while letting heat escape faster. Many have learned this lesson the hard way. Still, a little helps. It calms, it signals the body that rest is coming. You feel your muscles loosen slightly as you finish eating. The fire crackles low, already being allowed to fade. Later, as you lie curled in wool, you feel the slow burn of food doing its work. Warmth radiates outward from your stomach, subtle but real. This is internal fire, safer than flame. It lasts longer too. Your dreams tonight are steadier, less frantic. You sleep deeper when fed. Hunger sharpens cold, fullness blunts it. This is why winter starvation is so deadly, not just because of weakness, but because cold becomes unbearable without fuel. By morning, the warmth will be gone, spent quietly through the night, but it will have carried you through the worst hours. In winter, sleep begins at the table. The warmth from ale is the most dangerous kind because it lies to you. You feel it first in your chest, then in your face. A soft bloom that makes the room seem less hostile than it really is. Muscles relax, thoughts slow. Winter feels briefly negotiable. That's the illusion. You know better though, everyone does. Ale is common, safer than water, and part of daily life. But winter teaches restraint. Drink too much before sleep and the cold wins quietly. Blood rushes to the skin, heat bleeds outward. The body feels warm while the core cools, and by the time you notice, it's often too late. A historical fact recorded in medieval medical writing warns against excesses drink before rest in cold months, noting that sleepers were found stiff and pale come morning. They didn't know about hypothermia as a diagnosis, but they recognised the pattern. Warmth that arrives too quickly rarely stays. You sip, not gulp, enough to calm the edge of the day, not stool, enough to dull caution. The ale is weak, cloudy, slightly sour. It fills the stomach and carries calories, which helps. But you stop early. Winter demands clarity. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how widespread alcohol-related winter deaths were among peasants. Some argue they were rare, exaggerated by the later moralists. Others suggest they were common but underrecorded, folded into vague causes like found dead or taken by the cold. Listening to the night settle, you believe the danger was real enough to shape habit. Stories circulate, half warning, half folklore, about men who drank deeply to fight the cold and never woke. Children hear them early, adults repeat them every winter. Fear becomes education. You lie down with your head clear, wool tight, stomach warm but not swimming. The ale's faint glow fades quickly, replaced by a steadier heat from food and shared bodies. This is what you want. Slow warmth. Honest warmth. Outside, the wind picks up. Again, you hear it drag along the walls, testing weak points. Cold thrives on overconfidence. You don't give it any. Sleep comes more cleanly tonight. Not deeper. Winter rarely allows that, but steadier. You wake less often, adjust less. When you do stir, it's to tuck wool higher or pull your cap down, not because your body is confused by false heat. In the Middle Ages, warmth isn't chased recklessly. It's managed, measured, respected. Fire can kill you, drink can kill you, even food can fail you if misjudged. So you sleep with caution, clear-headed, letting the cold know you're still paying attention. And for another night, that's enough. Warmth that lies is worse than cold that tells the truth. Not all winters feel the same, and you know this without maps or measurements. Cold has accents. It behaves differently depending on where you are, how close you live to water, how high the land rises beneath your feet. Tonight, as you settle in, you think briefly about how others are sleeping, far from here under the same season but not the same cold. In northern regions, winter is dry and sharp. Cold bites cleanly, freezing breath in mid-air. Homes are built tighter there, walls thicker, roofs steeper to shed snow. Further south, winters are damper. Cold seeps instead of strikes, working its way through wool and wood alike. Both are dangerous. They just kill differently. A historical fact that supports this comes from medieval chronicles describing rivers freezing solid in England, while southern Europe battled relentless cold rain and mould instead. The Little Ice Age didn't blanket Europe evenly. It bent itself around geography, creating pockets of extreme hardship. There's an ongoing debate among historians about whether peasants migrated seasonally to escape harsher winters. Some evidence suggests limited movement, people seeking work or shelter in milder regions. Others argue most were tied too tightly to land and obligation to leave. You've never seriously considered going anywhere. Winter follows you, land holds you, homes adapt to region too. In colder zones, houses are lower, squat, hugging the ground. In wetter climates, floors are sometimes raised to escape damp, even at the cost of warmth. Every choice trades one danger for another. A quirky detail preserved in travellers' accounts notes that people from colder regions were often described as sleeping like animals, tightly curled, heavily covered, while those from milder climates slept more spread out even in winter. The observer meant it as insult. It was really adaptation. You imagine someone far away sleeping tonight in a stone house near the sea, listening to waves instead of wind, battling damp instead of frost. Their blankets are just as heavy, their sleep just as careful. As you lie here, curled and layered, you recognise that your habits aren't universal. They're local. Cold teaches differently depending on where it lives. But everywhere, winter demands attention. The wind outside carries a different sound tonight. Less howl, more hiss. Snow or rain you can't tell yet. You'll know in the morning. For now, you adapt as always, drawing inward, sharing warmth, trusting wool and food and caution to do their work. Winter may wear many faces, but its lesson is the same. Pay attention or it takes you. There are places where the cold is not just endured, but chosen. As you lie awake for a moment longer than usual, you think of them. Stone buildings far from villages, quiet even by winter standards. Monasteries, places where warmth is treated with suspicion and suffering is folded deliberately into sleep. You've heard stories. Everyone has. Monks rising before dawn in unheated cells, breath visible as they pray. Stone floors that never truly warm, even in summer. Winter there is sharper, less forgiving, and strangely intentional. A historical fact often overlooked is that many medieval monastic rules explicitly limited the use of heat. Fires were communal, controlled, and sometimes forbidden in sleeping quarters. Warmth was seen as indulgence, something that softened discipline and distracted from devotion. You don't understand this impulse, not really. To you, cold is already relentless. Why invite more? But the monks believe discomfort sharpens the soul, that denying the body teaches obedience. Winter becomes part of their spiritual training. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how strictly these rules were followed. Some evidence suggests exceptions were common, especially for the elderly or sick. Others argue younger monks adhered rigidly, sleeping fully clothed on narrow beds with little more than a thin blanket. Stone walls do not forgive mistakes. A quirky account from a monastery chronicle describes monks placing heated stones near their beds during extreme cold, only to confess it later as a moral failing. Even those who renounced comfort found ways to cheat winter when it grew too bold. You imagine trying to sleep in a stone cell tonight. No animals, no shared body heat, no thick mud walls holding even a hint of warmth. Just stone, air and prayer. The thought makes you pull your wool tighter. Stone behaves differently than earth. It absorbs cold deeply, then releases it slowly, long after the air has warmed. This is why castles, for all their grandeur, are infamous for their chill. Even nobles shiver there. You're grateful in a quiet way for mud and straw and smoke. They may be crude, but they hold warmth better than stone ever could. Poverty has its accidental advantages. As sleep returns, you think about choice. Some endure cold because they must, others because they believe it saves them. Winter doesn't care why, it treats everyone the same. You drift off again, not holy, not heroic, just alive. Even on the coldest nights, inequality doesn't sleep. As you settle in, wrapped in everything you own, you think, briefly of those who live only a short walk away, yet experience winter very differently. The divide isn't subtle. It's measured in walls, firewood, and how close sleep comes to freezing. Nobles sleep behind stone, which sounds impressive until winter arrives. Stone holds cold like memory. Castles are vast, draughty, and difficult to heat. Large hearths burn, yes, but they struggle against high ceilings and endless corridors. Servants feed the fires through the night, and even then rooms remain bitter. A historical fact worth noting is that many medieval nobles slept in smaller interior chambers during winter, abandoning grand halls entirely. Warmth, not display, dictated sleeping arrangements when cold truly set in. Still, nobles have advantages you do not. They have more wood, more wool, more bodies assigned to tend fires, beds stuffed with feathers instead of straw, canopies that trap heat, curtains drawn tight against drafts. Even cold stone bends eventually under enough. Resources! There's a scholarly debate about whether peasants or nobles slept warmer in winter. Some argue peasants, with their small spaces, animals, and shared heat, may have fared better on the coldest nights. Others point out nobles could simply burn more fuel and pile on more fabric. The truth likely varied by house and night. A quirky observation from period letters describes noble women wearing fur-lined nightgowns and gloves to bed, an extravagance unimaginable to you. Fur is warmth distilled. You'll never touch it. Children in noble households are less exposed, better fed, more protected. This shows in who survives winter. Cold is democratic in effort, but not in outcome. Resources tilt the odds. And yet even nobles fear winter. Even they lose people. Even their fires go out sometimes. No one is immune. You don't envy them much. Their problems are larger, louder, colder in strange ways. Your world is small, crowded, warm by comparison. As sleep returns, inequality fades. Cold doesn't respect rank while it works, it just tests. And tonight, like every night, you do what you can. Children sleep differently in winter, and you notice it every night. They curl tighter, instinctively, limbs tucked close, as if they're trying to disappear into warmth. You make space for them without thinking. Everyone does. The smallest bodies lose heat fastest, and winter is unforgiving to those who cannot protect themselves. Infants are swaddled heavily, wrapped until they resemble bundles more than people. Cloth over cloth, wool over linen, tied snug so no air can sneak in. A historical fact preserved in medieval medical advice warns that babies left too loose in winter were especially vulnerable to chills that turned fatal within days. Swaddling wasn't just tradition, it was defence. Children sleep closest to adults, placed deliberately where warmth is strongest. Mothers, older siblings, sometimes even unrelated adults form a barrier around them. This isn't sentiment, it's triage. If warmth runs short, it flows first to those least able to generate their own. There's a quiet scholarly debate about whether co-sleeping increased infant survival during medieval winters or whether it introduced other risks. Some argue shared sleep protected against cold. Others point to accidental suffocation or illness transmission. But winter doesn't offer safe options, only necessary ones. People chose the danger they could see over the one that crept silently. A quirky winter custom persists in some villages, placing a warmed stone near a child's bedding, wrapped carefully in the cloth. Too close and it burns, too far and it's useless. Parents learn the balance through watching, through fear, through nights spent half awake listening for breathing. Children wake more often in the cold. They cry quietly, not wanting to draw attention, already learning restraint. You pull them closer, tuck wool higher, murmur reassurances that don't promise warmth, only presence. Illness stalks children in winter. Coughs linger, fevers rise fast, cold weakens small bodies, making sickness harder to fight. Everyone knows winter graves are often small, no one says it loud. And yet children endure, they adapt quickly. They learn where warmth lives, between bodies, under wool, close to animals. By spring they will run barefoot again as if winter never tried to take them. As you drift back towards sleep, a child's breathing steady against you. You understand something simple and heavy. Winter is survived collectively or not at all. Tonight, you are part of that shelter. Winter sickness doesn't announce itself loudly. It slips in quietly, riding the cold the way smoke rides air. You feel it first as a tightness in the chest. A cough that lingers a little longer each morning, a stiffness in the fingers that doesn't quite fade once the sun rises. Illness in winter isn't dramatic, it's attritional. Cold weakens the body's defences. You don't know about immune systems, but you understand the pattern. People fall ill more often after long cold nights. Wounds heal slower. Old aches deepen into something permanent. A historical fact This effect, drawn from medieval burial records, shows clear spikes in mortality during winter months, even in years without famine or plague. Cold alone is enough. You listen for coughing in the dark. Everyone does. A wet, rattling sound draws attention immediately. It means lungs filling, breath struggling. Smoke from the hearth doesn't help. Years of inhaling it scar lungs quietly, making winter coughs harder to shake. Many people die not from cold directly, but from what cold invites. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how medieval people understood winter illness. Some historians argue they saw it as imbalance. Too much cold, too much damp. Others believe they recognise contagion in a limited way, avoiding the very sick when possible. But winter doesn't allow much distance. You share air whether you want to or not. Frostbite is another quiet threat. Fingers turn pale, then waxy, then dark. Ears ache, then go numb. People warm affected parts slowly, carefully, never with flame. This knowledge is learned through loss. Too fast and tissue dies. Too slow and it dies anyway. Winter offers narrow margins. A quirky but persistent belief holds that rubbing snow on frostbitten skin helps. Sometimes it does, sometimes it makes things worse. People argue about it endlessly. Desperation breeds theories. You check yourself each morning without ceremony. Wiggle toes, flex fingers, touch ears. If something doesn't respond, you act quickly, you don't dramatize it. Panic wastes heat. Sleep becomes lighter when illness is near. You wake to check breathing, your own and others. You listen for rhythm, for steadiness. When someone's breath changes, everyone notices. Winter trains your ears, and yet people recover too. Coughs fade. Strength returns slowly. Bodies are resilient, even when strained. Survival isn't guaranteed, but it's common enough to feel normal. You lie down again tonight aware of the risks, but not paralysed by them. Fear doesn't keep you warm. Preparation does. Cold may not strike you down directly, but it never fights alone. Cold isn't just weather here. It's personality, intention, presence. When winter stretches long enough, people stop treating it as a condition and start treating it like something that acts, something that listens, something that chooses. You've grown up with these stories. Everyone has. On nights when the cold feels sharper than it should, someone will mutter that winter is walking, that it's searching for the careless, the uncovered, the foolish enough to wander after dark. Superstition fills the gaps where certainty fails. A historical fact tucked into medieval sermons and folk records shows that clergy often used winter as metaphor, and warning, cold as punishment, warmth as divine favour. But folk belief went further. Cold wasn't just sent by God, it had its own will. You've heard that frost forms thicker on nights when the dead are restless, that certain winds carry voices, that leaving a shoe turned upside down invites cold into the house. None of these beliefs stop winter, but they give people rules to follow. Rules create the illusion of control. An illusion can calm fear. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether such beliefs genuinely influenced behaviour or merely reflected it. Did people cover their heads because of spirits? Or did spirits become an explanation for exposed ears freezing? Lying here with your cap pulled low, the distinction doesn't matter. The habit keeps you alive either way. Children are warned not to whistle at night in winter. It calls the cold closer. Adults scoff, but no one whistles anyway. Sound carries too far in frozen air. Some traditions claim iron. Objects placed near the door repel winter spirits. Others insist on evergreen branches hung inside, reminders of life that persists. A quirky belief holds that if the fire dies too suddenly, something unseen has passed through the house. That's why people pause when flames go out, listening. You do it too, without thinking. Silence feels loaded. You don't truly believe winter is alive, but you behave as if it's watching. You seal cracks. You bank embers. You pull wool higher. You stay still. Superstition becomes discipline. As sleep returns, these stories fade into the background hum of thought. They aren't frightening. They're familiar. They've shaped how you move, how you rest, how you survive nights like this. In a world without control over the weather, belief becomes insulation. You wake again, not because something is wrong, but because this is how sleep works now. Winter has divided the night into pieces, and your body follows the pattern without question. This is the space between first sleep and second sleep, the quiet middle hour when the world feels paused. You lie still at first, listening. Everyone else is awake too, in their own way. Breathing shifts. Someone clears their throat softly. A child stirs, then settles. No one speaks unless they must. Voices carry too much warmth away. A historical fact recorded in medieval diaries and court records confirms this rhythm. Segmented sleep was normal. People expected to wake in the middle of the night, especially in winter when darkness stretched long. It wasn't insomnia, it was structure. In warmer seasons, this hour might be used. People prayed, talked, checked animals, some even visited neighbours. Winter strips the interval down to its core: stillness, conservation, thought. There's a scholarly debate about whether this waking was biological or environmental. Some argue long nights reset circadian rhythms naturally. Others say cold forced lighter sleep, making waking inevitable. Lying here, cold pressing gently but persistently. It feels like both. Your body wakes because it must adjust, reposition, regard warmth. You make small corrections, pull wool higher, tuck feet back in, shift closer to a shared body. These movements happen almost without consciousness, refined over hundreds of nights. Winter trains muscle memory. Your thoughts wander briefly, then slow. This hour feels different, calmer, oddly reflective. The world outside is silent, frozen in place. Even the wind has paused. These are the coldest moments of the night, just before dawn begins its slow, uncertain approach. You don't count time, you feel it. When your thoughts grow heavier, when breathing deepens again, you know second sleep is ready. You let yourself drift back under, not fighting wakefulness, not chasing rest. Winter has taught you a different rhythm, and you follow it without resistance. Sleep here isn't lost, it's divided. When you wake this time, it's not your body that alerts you, it's the sound. Winter nights are never truly silent. They just trade familiar noise for sharper, stranger ones. As you lie still, wrapped and curled, your ears map the darkness. The wind moves first, slipping along the walls, testing seams you've patched 100 times. It whistles through narrow gaps, a thin, reedy sound that rises and falls like breath. You know this wind. You can tell how cold it is by how it sounds. Dry wind cuts, wet wind moans. Wood answers the cold reluctantly. Beams creak as they contract, a slow complaint that echoes through the house. Roof timbers shift. Sometimes the sound is so sudden it feels like a footstep overhead. Your heart jumps, then settles. Just the house adjusting to winter's grip. A historical fact found in medieval letters and chronicles notes that people often mistook these noises for intruders or spirits, especially in winter. Cold changes how sound travels, making it sharper and more deceptive. Fear thrives in misinterpretation. Animals add their own commentary. A cow exhales deeply, almost like a sigh. Chickens rustle, feathers scraping softly. A pig snorts, then goes still again. These sounds are grounding. They mean life continues, warmth persists. Outside, snow or frost shifts under its own weight. Sometimes you hear a faint crack as ice forms or breaks. In deep cold, even trees can split with a sound like distant thunder. You've heard it before. It never gets easier. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether heightened night sounds increased anxiety in pre-modern societies. Some argue people were simply accustomed to it. Others suggest winter nights were especially stressful, amplifying fear and superstition. Lying here, alert but not panicked, you suspect both are true. You're used to it, but you never ignore it. You catalogue the sounds without moving. This one means wind, that one means settling wood, that one means breathing. Anything unfamiliar would unmatter. Eventually the night soundtrack steadies, the wind evens out, the house quiets, animals sleep more deeply. Familiar patterns return, and with them, a sense of fragile safety. You close your eyes again, letting sound fade into the background. Morning is still hours away, but winter night has shown you everything it intends to for now. You don't sleep through the sounds, you sleep with them. By now, the cold no longer feels like an enemy you fight. It feels like a condition you assume, the way you assume darkness at night or hunger before meals. Endurance has settled into routine. Suffering, if that's what it is, has lost its sharp edges through familiarity. You don't think of yourself as brave. No one here does. Winter isn't survived by heroics, but by expectation. You expect the cold, you expect discomfort. You expect sleep to be thin and broken. Because you expect it, it doesn't shock you anymore. A historical fact buried in medieval sermons and moral writing reveals this mindset clearly. Hardship was framed as normal life, not misfortune. Cold winters weren't disasters unless they broke the pattern entirely. A harsh season wasn't something to protest, it was something to outlast. You lie curled as always, wool heavy, breath slow, body conserving. There's no anger in you toward the cold now. Anger burns energy. Acceptance is cheaper. You've learned that resisting winter emotionally only makes it longer. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether medieval peasants perceived their lives as especially harsh or simply ordinary. Some historians argue constant hardship normalised suffering. Others suggest people still felt misery keenly, but lacked alternatives. From inside the night it feels like both. You feel the cold, but you don't question why it exists. A quirky observation from later travellers describes peasants laughing quietly about frozen fingers and cracked skin, not because it was funny, but because humour dulled pain. Soft jokes passed the time, sarcasm survived where complaint didn't. You think about how nothing tonight is unusual. This house, this bedding, this cold, billions of nights like this have passed, unnoticed, unrecorded. No chronicler writes about a peasant surviving another winter night. Survival doesn't make history, it just makes tomorrow possible. Outside, winter holds steady. Inside, breath rises and falls. Somewhere between those two facts, life continues. You drift deeper into sleep, not because the cold has eased, but because your body knows this pattern well enough to rest inside it. Endurance becomes invisible when it's constant. This is what normal feels like, and normal carries you through. The night thins, almost without warning. You don't notice dawn arrive so much as you notice the cold change character. It loosens slightly, not retreating, just shifting, less sharp, more tired. Winter has spent another night pressing itself against you, and, now reluctantly, it eases its weight. You wake slowly as you always do, checking yourself before anything else. Fingers respond, toes tingle painfully as blood returns. Ears ache, then warm. This small inventory is the quiet ritual that ends every winter night. Another morning earned. The house reveals itself again in grey light. Wool piled and creased from hours of use. Straw flattened into new shapes. Breath hangs faintly in the air. Nothing has changed, and that is the victory. A historical fact worth ending on lives in the bones of this moment. Most medieval people did not die in dramatic disasters. They lived through countless ordinary nights. Cold, uncomfortable, exhausting, and simply continued. Survival was not exceptional. It was repetitive. There's a final scholarly debate that lingers over everything you've just endured. Were medieval peasants more resilient than people today, or merely forced into resilience by circumstance? Some argue constant exposure hardened them. Others insist the human body hasn't changed, only expectations have. Standing here stiff and alive, the answer feels simple. You adapted because you had to. A quirky truth preserved in later folklore claims winter loses interest in those who don't fight it. That if you accept cold, prepare for it, and move carefully within it, it passes you by more often than not. It's not true in any mystical sense, but it feels true enough to guide behaviour. You rise carefully, joints protesting, pain fades slowly but it fades. The hearth will be lit again, food will be eaten, bedding will be shaken out. Another night will come when the sun dips low, and you'll do all of this again, and that's the lesson winter leaves behind. You didn't survive because you were warm. You survived because you planned for cold, because you shared heat, because you accepted discomfort without surrendering to it. As the day begins, you carry that knowledge with you, not as wisdom, not as pride, but as habit. Habit is what lasts. Winter didn't defeat you. It simply passed over you this time.